What would you say is the most useful mathematical idea of the 20th century for physics?
Wow, there are lots of developments in mathematics which go parallel to physics. The strange thing is that the mathematics most useful for physicists is usually discovered also by mathematical physicists, not by mathematicians. Mathematicians are often much more interested in the grand total of the equations and the most general theorems that they can write down. Physicists have a very specific, specialized problem to work on, and they say, this problem we want to solve. What is the most appropriate kind of mathematics that we can use for this? And so it's typical that this mass gap problem is a physical problem in the very end, and most mathematicians don't understand the underlying theory well enough, for very good reasons, because the underlying theory actually has never been defined with utter mathematical logic by physicists. They say, we know the equations, or we think we know the equations, and we are assuming the equation have such and such properties. We think we can prove that, but then mathematicians say, no, this is not a proof, because you are assuming the answer in the first place. And what we call a proof is really something else. And so then there's a sort of culture difference among mathematicians and physicists. Physicists say, at some point we know what happens. We've checked everything, we see what happens, we are aided by our experimental observations which confirm that what we are seeing is right. And so we're happy with this assertion that the theory behaves such and such a way under such and such conditions. But mathematicians then ask, how do you prove that? And say, well, but that's not a proof. And so now, so mathematicians have an enormous obstacle in this sense, that they cannot really appreciate so much a problem if it hasn't been properly defined. And the problem with the mass gap is also, it's inherent in the problem. First, define what you are talking about. Write down the correct equations where you know that they are correct. And I think I know how to write down the correct equations, but I can't prove that they are meaningful at all. Maybe there exists, if you write equations this way, maybe the mass gap is not a well-defined question. And there's some concern about that, because most physicists don't pay any attention, but actually the problem is a circular problem. That if you don't know the solution, you can't even start writing down how the theory behaves under all circumstances. If you don't know how it behaves under all circumstances, you can't write down the solution. So there is a circular aspect to the equations which is not taken seriously by any physicist, because they are never plagued by that problem. When they do a calculation, they just ignore it. But in reality, the problem is there, which will probably stop most mathematicians in even considering the question. They say it's not well posed. So this is why I think eventually a physicist, a good theoretical physicist, will solve the problem, not a mathematician. Because theoretical physicists will also realize, this is what's missing in the original ansatz. Let's add that, and now ask it to mathematicians. Eventually, when they reach that stage, the problem has been almost solved.